have 60 years.
Nuh-uh. And if you could even lean on the table a little, and I'll move this. There. That's this way, then I'm going to get your voice, okay?
Oh, you're trying to get away that to pick both of us up.
Right, exactly. Let's see how I'm doing.
Well, you better turn it towards her. She's going to talk most.
No, I'm not either. You are.
All right.
Okay. Now, could you both introduce yourselves?
We did.
Oh, I know, but
I-
on tape.
You want me to talk to this thing?
Well, you talk
Yeah,
to
it's
me
still-
and it'll pick it
All
up.
right. Say when.
It's still who you are.
Okay, when? Okay.
I am Leonard Knight. And this is my wife, Mattie Louise Knight. Now what else?
Okay, well, I'll just ask you questions from now on in, okay? Well, I want to talk about your work in the cotton mills. When did you both start working there?
I started work in the cotton mill in 1927. I worked at the Knoxville cotton mill. And then,
Oh, your doggy. Okay.
that's Rusty working.
1927. Cherokee.
Uh-huh. And how old were you?
13-year-old.
How'd you get to start work when you were 13?
Well, my mother had to give me a worker's permit because my father had typhoid fever, and I had 3 younger than me, and I was the oldest one home to go to work. And back then, there wasn't no Social Security and no nothing. See, my father died in 31.
And what was
So-
your job?
Well, I went to work then just running winders.
How many hours did you work back then a day?
10 and a half.
And worked the wage, he was talking about the wage. She was working 10 hours and a half, 55 hours a week, $4 and,
Well, my first job, I made $5 a week, but I drawed $4.
What happened to the other dollar?
My mother had brought some jewelry, and not jewelry, silverware set,
Silverware.
and I paid for it. They took it out of my wages.
Royal Jewelry.
See, and they took it out of my wages.
Did she buy it from the company store?
No, just had it run through them.
Bought it from a company here, Royal Jewelry Company.
So,
I think it was owned by Mac Friedman.
no, it wasn't then.
Well, wasn't it? I don't know, it might not be.
It was Bush's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and what were you doing when you started work? How old were you when you started working in 27?
I was born in 1907. And I went to work in 23. I was 13, 16. And the first job I got was at Knoxville Cotton Mill. And I was sweeping in the spinning room. And then some of the other hands would quit, the sweeper could take another job. So I took dolphin on spinning frames. Dolphin means you take off the full bobbin and put on an empty one. And excuse me, I worked there for about 14 months. And that mill closed down. Then I went to work at Appalachian Mill. Went to work in a spinning room as a dolphin.
See, it was a knitting mill.
And that was,
That's where we was both working at when we got married.
Uh-huh.
yeah, that she was She was working on the winders then.
Now let's backtrack for 1 sec. What was it like to be 13 years old and going to work in a cotton mill?
Well, it was just like any other day to me. I didn't mind it.
Did your mommy and daddy work in the cotton mills too?
No,
Were you the first one in your family to go there?
no, my two older sisters that was married, they worked in textile.
Now, what were the conditions like in the mill? Could you describe it to me?
Well, the conditions, they talk about air conditioning and all that. Now, you're talking about conditions. Is it the work relation with the company, or is it the comfort conditions like in the mill? Now, the work relations in the mill at that time were good. Anybody, now, we'll go back to the Appalachian Mill where I met my wife. Mr. Lotspeech, Roy Lotspeech,
He owned the mill.
run that mill. Now his bosses was folks just like us. It wasn't highly educated people. It was people that had worked in the mill and knew what they were doing. And the relations between the boss and the workers was perfect. You couldn't ask for nothing better.
Could you describe it to me?
Well, they just
What's a
left you
good-
alone. The only thing, as long as you run your job. They
What-
said nothing to you, as long as you run your job and done your work.
When you learned your job, you had so much to do. As long as you run that job and made good material, then you had nothing to worry about. The boss would come out, good morning, hello, and the boss more just come in to see that the hands were on the job, to run the job, and he checked periodically each day to see that the material coming off of that job, like the yarn come from the spinning frames, they checked that yarn regularly. That was the boss's job in that day.
See-
He didn't sit up in the office and say, you do this, you do that, or you better. He didn't watch you to see if you was working. He knew you was working because your machine was producing.
And how about the workloads?
The workload was reasonable. If you had more than you could do, then that was taken off of you, and somebody else done it.
Did you have time for dinner?
No, at that time
No meal
We-
didn't stop for dinner.
we
You just
didn't
eat
we
on the
didn't
job.
stop for dinner, but we did. Everybody. She took a lunch, and I took a lunch. Now, when our job was caught up, we would run our job in such a way that between we would have like a little rest period. In other words, we'd have a few spare minutes, and during that time, we would eat our lunch.
Now, this is in 1927.
27 when I went to work. That was all during,
Well, it's
well,
depression.
27, 28, 29, during that period.
Roosevelt went in there. He cut us down to 8 hours.
And
Raised us up, and we had good working conditions.
working good. Well, I'll tell you what's
'Cause
true.
we stopped for lunch, we stopped off for dinner, and then we had two 15-minute breaks after he went in.
This is after Roosevelt went in. 'Cause, you know, it's interesting. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Well, up until that time, now, the biggest wage that I had ever made for 55 hours was $11.20. Now, and hers,
I was making 7 1/4.
seven. When we got married, she was making $7.25 for 55 hours.
And I was keeping my mother and two brothers and sister up.
So was that a living wage?
Well,
lived on
back
it.
then you lived on it.
Now you had to pay rent for your house?
No, we owned a home.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you were a lot luckier than some other people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And during that time, I made $9.20.
But
Now, a lot of people tell me that when they were on 11 and a half hours a day, that they had an hour for lunch, like from 12 to 1, that they didn't work straight for 11 and a half hours.
well, we never did work no 11 and a half. We worked 10 and a half. That's all I ever worked from 1927 on. Is all we ever had.
Didn't you get a break? You got no
We worked in
No.
the spinning room and the winding room.
You worked
We
straight
didn't have
through.
you worked 10 hours and a half.
Wow.
Now, like I say, the break that you got, you caught your
You
job
got
up.
your job all caught up or running good. If you
then-
kept your job in good shape running good, you had a few minutes in between.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard some people tell me in other mills that their bosses were on their backs all the time. And
I
that-
never worked
No.
where I had a boss rid me.
Really?
No.
Now where we learn, now that's what I was talking about, Mr. Lott's speech. He was a gentleman, a good man, and he would not, I don't believe he would allow his bosses to ride you like you're talking about. I don't believe, but there in Appalachia, they never done that. They never done that. But they did it, they taught you your job. They'd take you in green and teach you your job. Teach you how to run it the way they wanted it run. And then once you were taught, they
Yeah.
expected you to do that.
Now I'll tell you where you find those people where they say they is rid, they wasn't no good worker. 'Cause if you was a good worker, they left you alone, didn't say nothing to you. As long as you was good worker and run your job. Now I've seen them where they had to ride them to get them to work.
You know, there's workers and there's like the beef family, there's some workers and there's some lazy people. And that's like the same thing today.
It's like in Pennsylvania where we worked at when he retired. We had no boss. Just the owner of the mill, he hired you, took you in, showed you your job. And that was it. If you wanted to go in there late, you just went in, clocked in, and went to work. And if you wanted to quit early, you just shut your machine down, clocked out, and went on home. You didn't have to say nothing to nobody, 'cause you got paid for what you run.
Now, why'd you move from Appalachia to Cherokee?
Well, I learned to weave. I went in and got before I could make so much more money at weaving.
See, in Appalachia, you work by the hour, so much each hour.
And then there's running winders, and I first got Cherokee. I went in on winders, and then I got transferred into the weave shop. And filling batteries, that was putting filling in for the looms. And then I learned to weave
Just
on my own while I was filling the batteries, get caught up on my batteries, and then I'd help the weavers.
Were there a lot of women weavers back in 29?
Oh, yes.
There were. Now, Homer Logsdon did the same thing. He was a filling
Sure.
boy, and then he learned how to weave
Yeah,
on his own.
I was working Cherokee when he went to work there, honey.
Well, did he tell you about Mildred?
No.
His first wife.
Right.
That was
No,
his first
that was not
wife.
just,
Mildred Dockery is her name
Yeah.
now.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, I worked
she
with
worked
Mildred.
hard.
She still lives in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she lives over there on Sutherland Avenue. I see her quite often.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So you're still friendly?
Oh, yes.
Oh, great. So you moved to Cherokee Mills, and tell me about Cherokee. What was that like?
Well, I like to work Cherokee now. Some of them there, they had to ride to get them to work. And as long as you run your job, they said nothing to you
Mm-hmm.
and made good material.
Now, I've talked to a lot of people that worked in mills and lived in mill villages, and you never did that.
No, see, you're in Knoxville. They didn't have mill villages. Now, you just rented house wherever you could find a house.
You didn't rent it from the company.
No.
No, the companies have no houses. Not that I ever know that.
Well, they did in North Carolina.
Yeah,
They
I'm
didn't
talking about
here.
in Knoxville.
They never did have none here.
So did that make you not? So did you have? You must have had a real different relationship to the mill than someone who lived in a mill house, don't you think?
No, all workers was treated like.
Mm-hmm. So then Roosevelt came in.
Yeah.
Talk
That's-
close to the mic.
And then we,
That's when we started living.
How's that? What happened?
well, that's when we
Right.
got where we made a living wage.
We got,
And you was cut down, your work, your hours is cut down.
when you work less hours and you make more money and your rent and everything don't jump up right in your face, well, then you can start living pretty good.
Was that the first time you felt like that?
Right. It's the first time I ever felt like we was ever going to accomplish it or have anything. Because before that time, now you asked me how it was to live. Before that time, nobody, I'm talking about nobody that I know of, had a whole lot of credit cards and all this stuff. Now you could go and buy clothes on credit, but was nobody ever got a whole lot of credit and couldn't pay for it. We was taught if you don't have the money, you don't buy it. Now, if you have a good job and you want something, you don't have the money, you can get credit and buy it. Now, that's what I meant. Now, that's when we started, where we could, in other words, when I said we started living, we could buy the things.
We bought our home over on Dayton Avenue back when we was working Cherokee.
See, in other words, if the two of us is working and have a good job, and we know that we've got enough money coming in to pay that debt,
And then,
then we're in good shape.
So you could start to think about the future.
yeah,
Right.
at the time we bought a farm out in Anderson County and paid for it.
And that was when Roosevelt came in?
Oh,
Was
that
several
was
years
yours
after.
later. But
Uh-huh.
in other words, when Roosevelt come in, that was a start. That gave us a start to where, between the two of us, we could start buying the things that we wanted, not just what we had to have. Now, let me tell you how it was with her. Now, when we got married, she had one dress. One dress. She wore that dress to work. She'd come home at night. She pulled that dress off, washed it, and ironed it the next morning before she went to work. Now, when Roosevelt come in, and we got our wages raised up a little bit, we got to where we could buy extra clothes. We could have a little of this, in other words, we didn't have to scrimp.
Yep.
Because she still had to wash my hand and iron. But she had more than, that was, she didn't own a coat.
But that was during Depression. My father laid sick 3 years before he passed away, and I had two younger than me and a sister.
And you supported everybody?
Well,
I was the only one working.
Wow.
There.
You should be awful proud of yourself.
And well, Weldon Patchett, where my father had always worked at, my father had put him in business. See, we originally came from Georgia, and my daddy had took Weldon in when he was a young boy and taught him his job, and then he worked for him up here at South Must Tennessee. And he had sent, and he kept the taxes and everything up on our place for us.
Well, that
For
was
my daddy.
That was real nice of him.
Now that was the relations that the worker had with his boss. Her father worked at the marble mill with Weldon
As a
Paget.
blacksmith.
When he got sick and couldn't work, went down.
He kept
It
up
wasn't a
things like
case of
that
him
all-
not having Mr. Paget. He kept their insurance paid up.
He kept
He
everything
bought
like
coal in the winter. Yeah, what the heater was cold.
Now, do you think he would have done that for anybody?
that. No.
We don't know. All we know is he
Well,
did do it
I
with
know
us.
he did for all my daddy's brothers, no. But see, they took him in, his orphan boy, and raised him.
Yeah, so
And
that
that's
was
reading.
different.
Yes, it was different.
Yeah, I mean that was like kinfolk in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if the wages got higher, right? You went from about 15 cents an hour to 30 cents an hour, and you went from 10.5 hours a day to 8 hours a day.
That's right.
Wow! So you
Well,
must have
now
felt
that-
great.
I see. Now that's why we are Roosevelt people. A lot of people give Roosevelt hell. They say it wasn't this, it wasn't that, it wasn't this, it wasn't
He's the
that.
only one that helped the low place people.
When that, now we talk about welfare. You know, they had the CCC.
Well, they had what you call
No.
a charity, but
Now,
you
you
had to
heard-
work for them.
Back at that time, now if you didn't have a job, you could get on this program. You go uptown at the station, wherever the trucks was. Excuse me. The people that had the trucks would take people out to work. You go out there, you'd have a little ticket. You go out and work that ticket. Then when you come back in,
You got
they
it in
punch your
groceries.
ticket. Now, you take that ticket and go over to the, I would call it a depot, to the warehouse where they stored the groceries. And you could buy $2 worth of groceries.
This time in the cotton mills, I heard that in some cotton mills, some people told me that once they went on lower hours and higher wages, that a lot of the mills maybe they had trouble. You were working there?
Not that I ever knew of, no. Not that I ever knew of.
So then I'm trying to understand, and at the same time that Roosevelt said that he'd give higher wage, a minimum wage, and an
Yeah.
8-hour day, he also said you all have the right to organize.
Yeah.
So what happened here when they gave them the right to organize?
Well, the mills
talk
paid.
close by?
The mill paid more if you didn't organize. You made better wages. See, Cherokee always paid more than union wages.
Paid
They
as much
still
or
do.
more.
Still do. They always have. And that's how they kept the union out.
now, what? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, what I know that at Cherokee they did start to organize in 1933.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you tell me what your experience of that union was?
Well, just like she said at the start, the thing, after, now,
It didn't last
we
about
did
a year.
stay in it,
Just
I-
about a year.
probably a year. I don't remember just exactly how long, but I do know that I don't know if it was something to do with the union wages negotiations or what, but the man that was in charge of the union funds, you know what they had collected,
Yeah.
He skipped town with it.
he took the funds and left town. And that was the end of the union there. because nobody would pay into a union and then take the funds out. Now,
They
now
they
this
couldn't track him down. He left.
Was he an insider or an outsider?
insider,
He was from Cherokee?
yeah.
Well, no,
Don't
he
call
wa-
his name now.
He is originally from North
North
Carolina.
Carolina.
He'd come over here and went to work back. Well, my brother-in-law came over about the same time. There's about 12 of them come over here from North Carolina
Oh, good
together.
Uh-huh. Why did they couldn't find work over North Carolina, so they came here?
I
No,
don't know
they
why.
just-
They just took a notion they wanted to go to work Cherokee, and
Back that time, people, people that could, just like me and Mattie, we had no children, and we could go when we got good and ready. And if we take a notion we wanted to leave town and go to another town, we just picked up and went.
Okay. Now, I know that you were working in the weave shop in 1933,
Yeah.
and you were working in the weave shop in 1933, right?
We were working together.
You were working together.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were already
we was
married.
running a job right next to each other.
You
We got
were.
married in 29.
That
In
sounds.
31. 31
Yeah.
we got married.
Yeah.
But we was running job right next to each other, and we was running job next to each other when he retired. In
We've
Pennsylvania,
always worked
we
together.
always worked right together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Always done.
Did you meet inside the mill?
Yeah.
Did you?
We met at the Appalachian Mill.
Well, I seen him. The first time I seen him was at church
Or
with the
Margaret
girlfriend of
City Baptist
Bears.
Church.
Uh-huh.
Our car out there in front, white one. See who it is.
Nothing to do the rest of her life.
Oh, come on. So you just lean near that microphone. My first question is about that Beto man. I wanted you to tell me again what that problem was and why you left that mill.
All right.
I.e. efficiency? What'd you call it?
BDO is what they call it.
Okay. Can you? That's when you were in the
They called it quality control. It was BDOs. In other words, they was checking out how much work one person could do in 1 hour, and the quality that he could get from that 1 hour's work. They was checking out how much leisure time you
had
can
in
make,
leisure time, they give you more work.
checking out how much leisure time you had on the job that you had. Now, you know, I told you we had no lunch hour, that we ate on a break that we could make.
Is that because of the Beto man?
Well, no.
No, if he
The-
went in there, he
the-
didn't want you to have that time to eat.
The Beto man was figuring your job up. If you could run, if you had any spare time, then you could do more work. You couldn't use it for yourself. You could do more work.
Oh, you won't go outdoors.
You want
Describing it one
The
step
bit-
at a time.
the Beto man went right behind.
We was making twice the wages up there almost. That's the difference in the wages.
Did you get a pension from the place in Philadelphia?
No, textile back didn't have textile
I don't know no
pensions.
textile company that has a pension. Do you?
They've started pension plans now, but
The only-
back when we did,
Some companies.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the only companies that I know that do have pension plans are those that do have unions, that they've been
Yeah.
able to negotiate a pension.
Well, you see, honey, I retired in '69,
Right.
so
So you just draw
And
Social
I have a-
Security?
Social Security. That's right.
of course, I went to work at the hospital after we moved down
As a
here and
nurse?
worked. No, I just worked in a cleaning job. And I worked down there from 71 till 76. And I retired when I was 62.
Well, listen, this has been very, very helpful. When I come back here, I'm going to be coming back with the gentleman that I work with. His name is George Stoney. He's from Salem, North Carolina. He makes movies. We do that together. And I think the two of us would really love to talk with you again and possibly record you on camera. Would you be willing to do that?
I sure will.
Wouldn't bother me.
Wouldn't bother you? If you could work in a mill all those years, nothing's probably going to frighten you now.
I'll
right?
tell you, I enjoyed working textile.
Right. I never felt working. You know,
And weaving, I love to weave, because you could work a mill like Cherokee. You had different types of material. You know, when I always look forward when warp run out, I see what kind of material I was going to have on it next, and it just interests me.
it is.
I liked it.
Textile company. Textile is not drudgery.
I
mean,
really enjoyed it.
Up until such time as you start stretching out. When you give a man so much work to do that he can't enjoy what he's doing, that's drudgery.
That's what I said, the union up there in Philly now, where we was only running 8 looms. And they done so darn sorry and kept wanting people to come out on the strike and close that mill out, and we didn't even have no bosses. It was actually a play job to me, because I went to work there all for 42 looms in New Orleans and went up there running 8 looms. It was a play job.
Now, I've heard people say that cotton mill people are lint heads. I've heard this term.
Well, a lint head.
What's a
honey.
lint head?
Lint is the dust off of cotton.
That's
cotton.
what-
Now, when if you're working inside, the spinning room's real bad. Now,
Or the
where
card
Luther
room.
worked, the card room's worse.
But the weave shop
It will
is
settle
not.
on your hair.
Weave shop's
Look
not
like snow.
bad like that though.
But,
That's
but
right. Lint head.
did that upset you? If
Well,
someone
no.
No. No, I enjoy textile.
No, but I don't mean the lint part. I mean when you heard people say that word.
No, it didn't bother me
No,
because
no,
I know
no.
what it meant is because
Yeah.
you had, lint got on
It just
you.
means that a lint head is a man that works in a cotton mill.
You got that lint from the cotton
You say a
on your
farmer,
hair.
that's a man who works in a
Well, you
on
always
grass.
combed your hair before you left out there.
You say a
And we had-
mechanic, he works on automobiles.
And we had rubber air hoses
Mm-hmm.
to clean our clothes off, blow and clean them off before we left out.
You just get lint on you, you know.
That's
you
right. That's
take
what
your
give
hose
them
and
that
blow it off.
nickname.
No, that's-
Now,
well, now some people, I'll tell you something else. Now, some people can do. Some people think they are too good to work in a cotton mill.
But I enjoy
In other
it.
words, you're poor folks. That's probably where you get that lint head. Like some people talk about rednecks, or it's a derogative remark.
Just
But
slang they use.
to me, I never felt bad.
we've talked to some people. Some people I know. I've heard about people who are ashamed after all these years to talk about being in a cotton mill.
Not me.
How's that? What do you think about that? They don't want to admit it.
I think that's stupid people. They didn't have sense not to thank the good Lord for what He gave them. Well, I know people today that say, hell, I wouldn't work at Cherokee for nothing.
But I'll tell you,
But they've never been in a mill. They don't know nothing about it.
but when I worked in the mill, I run samples, biggest majority time. That was, it had to be perfect. That's what they got their order on. It's sent to the different companies, stores and all. And I run the samples, biggest majority, and every mill nearly I went to work in after I worked there few weeks they'd put me on running samples because I'd, took pains and made
Because
good
you
work.
didn't make no seconds.
And I made a bonus for 2 straight years because I made less seconds than anybody in the whole mill of all 3 shifts. So
Now-
always, and that traveled with you. That's the reason you could get a job anywhere. That traveled behind you.
Now I want to ask you something. Will you feel comfortable? One of the things we're gonna want to talk about your early experience in the mills. We're gonna want to talk about your experience with the Beto system because I've never heard anyone quite frame it like that. And I'm gonna also want to talk about Roosevelt and what he did for everybody, and what you thought about him, and what it was like to move from one mill to another, and also about what it was like to experience the union coming in, whether you were on one side or another.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to be comfortable for you?
Well, it won't bother me.
Okay. And I have like newspaper articles and stuff, and I might show them to you and see, because I would be real interesting to have someone say, yes, this was in the paper, and I didn't believe the way it was written, and no, or no, I never saw this in the paper, or that kind of thing.
Well, now, talking about that. Now, you talk about Luther. My brother is here. Like he told you, he went to 3rd grade. Now, he does do a whole lot of reading today. But now me, I had a little better education. And I went to night school. And I done a whole, in other words,
Well, he took designing and everything in
And,
textile, so
when he gets talking about some things, about he don't believe this, don't believe that, that's, oh hell, that's just what you read in the newspaper. Well, the thing is, he's telling you what he knows. Now, since he couldn't read the newspaper, he couldn't say yes, he couldn't say no. But he does know what happened at Cherokee. Because me and him both was working there when Roosevelt was elected. I never will forget today.
no, me and you was working at Appalachia when Roosevelt was. Yeah.
Well, anyhow, we was working there when they,
When Social Security went in, we
Yeah.
was working at
And
Cherokee.
you were working at Cherokee when that union came in.
yeah. And, but now, when the Union come in, Luther stayed on. It wasn't long after that till me and Mattie left here, I don't think. How much
we
did
did
we
live
work
there.
there?
Honey, we left here in 40 and stayed gone a little over a year when we went out to Oakland.
Yeah, but what
When
time,
we
what
come-
year was that Union there?
The union came in 1933.
We didn't leave here
In
the first time till
34.
40, honey.
Yeah.
So you
Well,
were
then we
working
had-
there.
Then we had to work a long time.
We did.
there, Yeah.
We worked there and then worked over Brookside for a good bit.
Did you work in Brookside? You went to you left Cherokee and went to Brookside, and then you left.
I'll tell you, I got a job at, worked over Brookside. Been there about 2 or 3 weeks. I took an ocean to go back to Cherokee. I went to Cherokee and worked 2 days. And they knew I was working Brookside. And then I went back in over at Brookside just like I'd never been off.
Was this right in 34?
Yeah. And when me and him left here in 40 and went to California, we come back here. We was gone a year. We come back in here. We got in on Friday. Monday night we went in on our job just like we'd never been gone. And they put us to work. Next morning before quitting time, he says, now you'll have to go by the office and sign up.
We hadn't even signed up.
We hadn't even signed up, but they let us work. That's how, now we could always work.
That's why we tell you, if you,
If you're a good worker, you could work.
that's right. Yeah, if you worked in a cotton mill and was a good, conscientious worker, you done the best you could as far as quality or production was concerned, you could get a job. Now, weaving pays you so much a pick. That's a thread. So much a yard for each cloth. If you've got 8 looms and you're lazy as hell and you got one stopped all the time, you're not making production.
And what if like those folks that got blacklisted, that some of them I met, what if you try to bring the union in? You were out? Could you forget about your job too?
I don't know.
I don't know,
We
'cause-
didn't have that much. We didn't have that much
You never
to do
had
with
to deal
it.
with that.
In other words, as far as any union business,
Of course, when we worked
we have nothing
Brookside,
to do
now
with
we
it.
belong union over there because it was union. But we didn't have no problem.
What year was that?
just off and on, different year.
The last time we worked over there was in 51. They come out on strike in New Orleans, and we come up here and went to work and worked till they went back to work down there. And they called us, Mr. Childress did, and told us they was back working, and we went back. Now that's how we could get a job. Because he knew where we was at, and he called us and told us that it's went back to work, so we headed back.
You know, we could be working in Texas in the mill at New Braunfels, and take a notion we wanted to leave, pick up the phone. I could have called Louisiana. I could have called Tennessee.
We work anywhere that.
Now, did you ever bump into people that had left Cherokee in any of these other
Oh,
mills?
Lord,
Lord,
yeah.
yeah, we worked with them up in Pennsylvania.
Worked with them in Texas and in Pennsylvania. Worked.
I mean, these are people that left Cherokee and
Yeah,
went to these other mills?
yeah. Jeff Patique. Well, he went by Jeff Patique. He married a girl here, worked Cherokee, and he is known as by Tom here.
I heard about a guy that went to Texas, Zach Self. Do you remember him?
I know herself, but I can't figure.
Is
remember.
that no good that pawned his tools to me?
No, that wasn't him. That was another that lived out here close to Cherokee.
He went to Post City, Texas. Zach Self?
Well, no, we never worked there.
What about, did you ever work in Utica, New York?
No, we never got no further up
Now,
there.
Patique, when it left here, he worked in New York before he come down to Philadelphia and went to work.
What about North Carolina? Did you ever work there?
Yeah, we worked at
Durham, North Carolina, and we worked at Charlotte, and we worked at Gastonia, and we worked at Dallas,
Really?
North Carolina.
Okay. Now that's all like in the Gastonia, Belmont, Charlotte
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet any people from here that was working over there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember who?
No,
No, back then I could have told you. And
Were those any people you think that might have left here in 34 and went to North Carolina?
no.
I
Then
wouldn't think
there's
so.
people that we worked with in New Orleans that used to work here in Knoxville.
Really?
You could find them in any
Yeah.
textile.
Just about really and truly now.
And now in Oakland, we never did meet anyone.
Yeah.
That's the only mill
Yeah,
away from here we didn't run into nobody.
In
Of course, we
California.
were the only ones. It was the rest of them, all of them was Mexicans except us.
In Louisiana?
Well, no, in Oakland,
In
California.
Oakland, California.
They had 3 Puerto Rican women and me, and all of the men was Mexicans, except Leonard. Now, that's, we had a lovely time working there because we couldn't understand them, but it was a good place to work. But
Learn a
you
little
just couldn't-
Spanish? You did? You learned some
No, I
Spanish?
didn't learn it.
Oh, you should have learned some Spanish.